My name is Dr. Kyla Bennett, and I am the Director of Science Policy at PURE, Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, a nonprofit group that's headquartered just outside of Washington, D.C. I am located in the state of Massachusetts in Easton, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about some of the myths surrounding artificial turf. I am not being paid for my time here. So, what is artificial turf? Artificial turf is basically plastic grass on a plastic backing with infill that holds the plastic grass blades up, as evidenced by this little illustration right here. We do know that artificial turf is bad for the environment. And for decades, environmentalists were focused only on the crumb rubber infill. But the problem is that the crumb rubber infill is not the only problem. Industry is now moving away from crumb rubber towards what they call organic and other infills. When they say organic, they don't mean organic like the type of vegetables that you go and buy in the grocery store. They just mean that it's made from something that was once living, like walnut shells, coconut husks, or brockfill, which is an engineered wood. They're also using infills like ground up sneakers, silica sand, and quark. But organic infills can be dangerous as well. In 2021, a consultant for a project on Martha's Vineyard looked at brockfill, and they found that brockfill contains PFAS, which I'm going to talk about quite a bit in a little while, a number of metals, and all sorts of nasty chemicals. So infill is the least of our worries. Why? Because in 2019, I was one of the two scientists that discovered that artificial turf contains per- and polyfluoral alkyl substances. The acronym for that is PFAS. If you haven't heard about PFAS, you should learn about them. They're a class of thousands of chemicals. EPA thinks there are about 14,000 of them right now. They're nicknamed forever chemicals because they don't degrade naturally in the environment. They're very, very persistent because all PFAS chemicals have a carbon-fluorine bond, which is one of the strongest organic chemistry bonds known to humans, and it just does not break. Many of these PFAS bioaccumulate in your bodies, biomagnify in the food system, and all that we have studied are toxic. So in 2019, when we made this discovery, it made the front page of the Boston Globe because previously no one had known, well, industry may have known, but no one else knew that these toxic chemicals were found in the blades and the backing of the artificial turf. Why are PFAS scary? They cause a host of medical conditions in humans, like increased risk of diabetes. They're endocrine disruptors, so they interfere with the body's natural hormones. They can decrease a person's chance of getting pregnant. They can reduce fetal growth. They can increase your blood pressure and cause preeclampsia in pregnant people. They can increase your cholesterol levels. They are linked with numerous cancers like kidney cancer, testicular cancer, and liver cancer, possibly even brain cancer. They also reduce your immune system and make vaccines not work. They can cause children to be obese, and they cause growing, learning, and behavioral issues in children. How toxic are PFAS? Currently, states regulate PFAS in parts per trillion, and parts per trillion are a very, very small amount. And it's really hard to wrap your brain around how tiny they are. So how to grasp the concept of a part per trillion? That's 1 penny of $10 billion, or 1 ounce in more than 31 million tons, 1 second in more than 317 centuries, or 1 droplet of water in more than 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So EPA in March of 2023 issued some proposed maximum contaminant levels for drinking water. And they said that there is no safe level of PFOA and PFOS, which are 2 of the most studied types of PFAS in the country. Their proposal includes regulation of 4 other PFAS, but they are saying that there will be no PFAS in drinking water, no PFOA and PFOS over 4 parts per trillion. Those MCLs will be finalized this spring. It's very important to keep in mind that there are 3 routes of exposure for PFAS: inhalation, ingestion, and dermal absorption. So why is PFAS in artificial turf? PFAS acts as an extrusion aid, so the molten plastic doesn't clog the machinery. If you have children or grandchildren, or when you were little, if you ever played with those Play-Doh toys that extrude the noodle-like Play-Doh through the metal holes, that's how these grass blades are made. And because they're hot plastic, they get sticky and they can actually clog up the machinery. PFAS may also be added into the plastic itself as UV protection and also to prevent breakage. So the Synthetic Turf Council says that PFAS is necessary and they can't figure out how to get rid of it. In June of 2023, the state of California tried to ban PFAS in artificial turf, and the Synthetic Turf Council argued strenuously against it, and they said, we do not have, if you make us take it out by January of 2026, we don't have time to come up with an alternative, which means to me that there is PFAS in every single brand of artificial turf. If they can't figure out how to make artificial turf without PFAS, it's in all of the turf that exists today. Worse, this PFAS will leach off artificial turf fields into water. Dr. Graham Peasley and his student, Dr. Heather Whitehead of Notre Dame, tested dozens of samples of artificial turf, and they found PFAS in every one. Most disturbingly, they found that approximately 75% of the turf contains PFOS, one of the most dangerous PFAS that causes cancer. So it's a carcinogen. Real-world examples show that the water around artificial turf quickly becomes contaminated with PFAS. And in Martha's Vineyard, a study showed that 12 parts per trillion of just the 6 PFAS regulated by the state of Massachusetts will leach off a brand new field, and this becomes more as the field ages and wears. Artificial turf also sheds microplastics, about 480 pounds per year per field. In Sweden, microplastics from turf comprise 15% of all microplastics in water, second only to roads. Artificial turf also contributes to climate change and creates heat islands. We're talking about a carpet of plastic. Natural grass will absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, and artificial turf does exactly the opposite. It releases carbon dioxide, methane, and other chemicals. Artificial turf can also be 80 degrees hotter than grass, and it doesn't matter what kind of infill you're using, they're all hot. The manufacturing, installation, service, and disposal of just one artificial turf field is responsible for the generation of 55.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Natural grass, on the other hand, has a net reduction of almost 17 tons. So let's talk about Hamilton, your town. If you convert 3 of your 5 current fields to artificial turf, you're going to have more than 5 acres of plastic carpet. This will result in PFAS, microplastics, and hot water, altering the adjacent wetlands, which will require an order of conditions from your Conservation Commission and a permit from the DEP. None of this can be mitigated. Because of these dangers, several towns in Massachusetts, Sharon, Wayland, and Concord, have issued moratoriums on artificial turf, and more towns are considering it every day. Artificial turf also leads to more injuries for the athletes. These are all very recent articles. In 2023, there was a scientific peer-reviewed article that said there are higher foot and ankle injury rates on artificial turf compared with natural grass. In natural grass fields are a softer playing surface compared to synthetic turf fields. Artificial turf increases the risk of concussion by 6 to 7 percentage points. That was from 2023. And even NFL players hate it, and they are trying their darndest to get artificial turf removed and go back to natural grass. One of the other problems with artificial turf is that it cannot be recycled. There was a recent article in the Philadelphia Inquirer that did a deep dive and a big investigative report into how all of these claims of artificial turf recycling are false. And most of these fields are dumped in wetlands, in farm fields, or they're burned or shipped overseas. Here's an ad from Tenkate. They say, "We've launched a synthetic turf recycling program." And then you can see the next sentence says, "This joint program with ExxonMobil." will begin by processing 50 aged turf fields. Well, ExxonMobil has a pyrolysis place in Baytown, Texas. So that's not recycling, they're burning it, which is causing problems for the EJ communities down in Texas. What does industry say? Industry always claims that real grass requires pesticides, that it requires too much water, doesn't give you enough playtime, it's too expensive, it's green because it can be recycled. And some say there's no PFAS in their turf. None of this is true. Don't buy into this. Artificial turf is bad for the environment. There's no benefit to it. The environmental damage will be felt for decades to come. And yes, drought and climate change is an issue for playing fields, but artificial turf is not the answer. Artificial turf is bad economically. It's more expensive to maintain properly. It does need watering. In fact, a study in New Mexico shows that artificial turf needs more water than natural grass. It does need to be replaced, and infill needs to be replaced every year. Plus, the potential liability issues are huge. What are those liability issues? EPA is currently finalizing these regulatory limits on PFAS. States are making more stringent MCLs. There are class action suits everywhere for contaminated water. If you're going to go forward with artificial turf, you must require PFAS-free materials backed up by independent testing, including leaching test. But spoiler alert, it's just not possible. Industry falsely claims they have PFAS-free turf, but when you ask them for their lab tests, you can see in this one, they say their detection limit was 1 part per million. Remember, we are regulating PFAS down to part per trillion. If you're setting your detection limit at part per million, doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. There is PFAS in every single brand of artificial turf. It will contaminate your wetlands with PFAS, with hot water, and with microplastics. All of these are alterations under the Wetlands Protection Act. It will lead to possible liability because you're going to have contamination of adjacent wetlands and waters, and you're going to contaminate your soil. These PFAS can travel for miles, so anybody living near these fields will also become contaminated. It's interesting that in my town, I live in Easton, Massachusetts, we just had to spend $10 million for a filtration plant for our water. We have 6 wells. The 2 wells that are most contaminated are next to our 2 artificial turf fields. Is that circumstantial evidence? Absolutely. Is it a red flag for towns like you? Absolutely. Natural grass can work. The town of Sharon, Massachusetts just put a moratorium in on artificial turf, and they're building an organic grass field that will not need pesticides. It will not leach PFAS, and it will not leach microplastics. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. You can reach out to me at kbennett@pure.org. Thank you very much.